Hi. Hi, Shamita. What are you doing?
Oh, hi.
What's going on? Oh, hey.
I I'm excited for this one.
Are you? I'm excited too.
I I'm I'm excited because there's just so much. Like they discuss so much that I feel like we're missing like to understand. I don't Okay,
What do
let
you
me
mean?
start over then.
Okay, okay. Reset, reset.
Yes, I need to see what has his DNA on it because I've only heard, like rumblings because I'm trying not to.
I know. It's hard, isn't it?
But when like I kind of like skipped through it and I put the clip together, it like they got a lot. They
You
got a lot.
accidentally heard some things.
I know. So I'm just excited to. I don't know. It's fascinating to me.
It is. It is. This is like a really this is a lot of forensics, and these are the kind of cases that I like. So, let me say hi to everybody. Hello, Allie 79. Hello, Amelia Sparkles. Hello, Lupe Fuentes. I feel like I'm missing somebody, but no, I guess I got everybody. Hi, hi, hi. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for spending your Thursday night with us. We're going to go over more Forensic Inc. This time we're going to be watching, hold on, let me look at her name real quick. Denise Jones. That's who we're watching. So, last night we watched um the medical examiner and low key, okay, look, we got off onto a totally different subject at one point and we watched the majority of her testimony. Okay, we got the gist, we got the big important parts, in my opinion. I mean, we missed like 7 minutes. um
Yeah.
but I think we're caught up for the most part. And then I wanted to remind everybody that this is your trigger warning, that this is going to be DNA. And I mean, it shouldn't, it's not going to be graphic and gruesome, I doubt. But I mean, obviously, they're going to be talking about the different tools that were used. And so that might be,
Maybe like some blood on
yeah,
things.
yeah, it might gross you out a little bit, but just to warn everybody, that's what's up. Um, I think, let me see how long her testimony is. Hold on. It's about an hour and a half. So we might have to skip a little bit, or I'll have to talk a lot less.
I
But
think they do like a lot of like unboxing the evidence. Is this what this is? You know,
right, right,
and
right.
then putting
Okay.
it back so we can probably like skip, skip.
So, yeah, I have to say that um, I watched a little bit of her testimony just because it was on the other day, and I was watching it live and then I turned it off. But I didn't skip ahead, but it brought me back to when the audio of the trials of the Eccles Baldwin and the Miss Kelly trial were available. And at that time, there wasn't a website that was really big enough to host those files. So what happened is people volunteered. Hey, Navigator, how you doing? Um, Welcome. Glad to see you. There wasn't the website didn't have enough bandwidth to host those files. They're huge, right? They're trials. And
Hmm.
so what happened is people volunteered to transcribe the trials. Okay. And I got Detective Ridge's testimony, and he is talking about they're not sticks. They're bigger than a stick. They're more like small branches, okay? But they were wrapped in brown paper. And so every single time they brought a piece of evidence. It had to be unwrapped, and all you could hear was this incessant crinkling of the brown paper. I still have nightmares about it. It's, because he's
The
talking.
grave.
Yeah, he's like talking of it. He's talking and unwrapping it. So it was bad news bears, and it was annoying. I'm like, can you just one thing at a time, sir? You unwrap and then speak, please. I wish we had mute the mic back then because it was so annoying. But yeah, at least they don't do that in this trial. They're boxed up. So
I like this judge. I just gotta say, like, I really like this judge.
I do too. I think he's very fair. I think that he's reasonable. I don't think that he is sometimes when you are watching a trial, it does seem that the judge is more favorable to one side or the other,
Hmm.
and it's really evident. And in this situation, I feel like he is a really good example of an unbiased judge. He's doing exactly what a judge is meant to do. Hi, Team Psych Ward. Where will you be? No, unacceptable. Back in 20 minutes. No, ma'am. You stay. Just kidding. Do what you got to do, babe. Um, yeah, I feel like you know, he's nice. And he lets people take breaks when they need to. And even when I don't know what the lawyers' names are. I'm so bad for Chandler Bongs.
Uncle Judge.
Uncle Judge for Chandler's his lawyers, the defense lawyers, I don't know what their names are, but when she interrupted that day and she was all, "Excuse me, judge," like, I mean, just the girl is testifying. You didn't even make an object, like it was so rude. And he was just like, "Oh yeah, what?" Like he didn't, most judges would be like, excuse me, Miss Ma'am, no. And whatever the fuck you're about to ask you're gonna get told no, frankly, because you're rude. That was rude. So
Yeah,
yeah, I like him too.
I like his bow ties. They
He is a
get me.
snappy dresser. He is a snappy dresser. He really
And he
is.
always has like this one little curl, like this perfect curl, like right near his forehead.
So far from the jury, from juror number 1 and juror number 3, the judge is getting 2 thumbs up from both of us. So he's up to 4. I feel like Dr. B would agree with us. I think she also likes this judge because she, like loves a bow tie. I don't know what it is. I like a good regular necktie, but there's something, not everybody can pull off a bow tie. And this guy can pull off a bow tie. We're going to call him Uncle Curly Bang Judge. That's his new name. It's gonna be hyphen. Did you guys, while we're waiting, because I wanna give people a little bit of time to get in here. There's one person I'm waiting for specifically to get in here, before I start. But if you guys would take a moment to, go and check out the description and check out the hashtags and let me know what you think. And hey, while you're over there, if you want to give your girl a thumbs up, a thumbs down, whichever way, I'd appreciate it very much.
Very muchly.
Very muchly. Because, Shamita, I have to say, my job on this case has been pretty easy. I just run my mouth, which clearly is not a problem for me. But our pal Shamita over here has been in charge of uploading all of the videos and then making them public once the live is over. And that's a lot of work because there's a lot of testimony, and she's done a fantastic job. So, Shamita, babe, will you drop your link in the chat so people can go over there and subscribe?
Yes, let me, I'm not prepared.
Well, it's okay. We're waiting. You like that, Amelia? I thought you guys would like that. I'm gonna go back and edit. Well, I mean, it doesn't take that much, but like, add that to the description of all of the lives that we've done. Chazzle dazzle.
I saw it on a random post on Facebook. Like I just did like a I don't know search for public posts with his name on it, and it
Mhm.
came up Hazel Dazzle. I was like, yeah,
I
someone
like
was listening.
Yes. Yes. Like, that's one of those things, a little that's one of those details of a trial. When you think about all the things we've heard, right? And even if all you've done is just watch it with us, right? We've heard a lot, okay? All
Hmm.
the information we've been told, but there's always those one thing, "No, you don't have to. Hey, Crackling Rosie, true crime now, you don't have to, you no, you don't need to catch up with the other videos. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you should go back and listen if you want. If you just wanna get some, if you don't have anything else to do and you want to, we'd love to have you watch them, of course, but you don't have to. It's not necessary for like to be in here tonight because we're watching the we're watching the testimony and then discussing it. So we're all kind of on the same page. But we've heard a lot of information and then boom, that's one of those things that's just gonna stick out the whole time forever. It's gonna be the
Hmm.
thing in the case. Chazzle dazzle. I don't know why I have to say it like that, but I feel
That'll
like
be
that's
his prison name, and
yeah, jazzle dazzle, and have it written on the back of his his jumper.
oh jeez.
So, I am just give me just one oh, whoa, I just dropped my own phone. Give me just one quick second real quick. I want to,
Okay. Hi, Molson Man.
"Hey, Molson man, how you doing? What's kicking?"
Um,
Oh, you do? Crackling Rose, you like to do the live and then watch the replay? You should all watch me. If you ever listen to me on the replay, listen to me at 2 speed. I'm telling you, it doesn't really change that much. Like, it's the only way I can, tolerate my voice. So, there you go. So, if you have you know, that's just how I get through it. I have to listen to myself at 2 speed. I don't think anybody really likes their voice, though. But,
no. I remember hearing it like for the first time as a kid, and it's like, no, that's not.
is that
Because it
what I
sounds like deeper in your head.
Yeah, and then you're
I was
like,
like this, like,
"Aw, thank you, Crackling Rosie." Listen, I like to make people laugh. I be cracking Schmida up all the time. But Schmida cracks me up a lot all the time too, all the time. I these cases that we cover, right, they're super heavy. We're talking about a loss of life here. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's deep. And then, so if there are moments where you can have a little levity to break the tension, I think it should happen.
hmm.
What, Molson man? Uh-oh, let Molson man fell off the wagon. What happened? What were you doing over there, Molson man? When, do we need to have a meeting?
I know. I'm always like one foot still on the island. Like I came across like a freaking picture today of Chris Watts as a kid, and I was like, oh, I've never seen this one, and like, why do I care?
Because
I don't know
you
why
were
I care, but I
invested.
got like all like, oh, I've never seen this little pinhead picture. Like, oh, I
Amelia,
just
I
can't
hope you
seem
feel
to.
better, sweetie. She's got a headache, so if you're not in
Oh,
the chat, well, I hope we don't make it worse.
yeah,
Molson
my
man,
dear.
I will volunteer to be your sponsor. Listen, I have to rein Schmida in. Don't tell her I told you this. I gotta rein her ass in like at least twice a week. Come on,
Always.
Schmida, we're not going back to the island. No, we done left that island. We're over here. We're in Wisconsin land. Okay, we're over at the farm. We don't want to go to the island. Please come with me. Shemina will be like, okay, I'm coming. No, but I would watch that too. If you would have shared that link and said, hey, Jen, look at this, look, no lie, I would have clicked. I would have. I absolutely
Yeah.
would have. Yeah, because I don't know. Sometimes, look, I've clicked links I know better than to click. I've clicked links I know are going to make me mad and frustrate me, and I click them anyway. So who am I to really judge? I'm probably not even a good sponsor if you want to know the truth. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard because that case is just so, I don't know. It's just it's hard because there are answers, but the biggest question and probably the single most important question is why, and that's never going to be answered. And at least in other cases, regardless of, there's never a justification, right? Not that's never going to make sense to us, but they give a reason. But in the Watts case, there's just no reason. Like he never explains the why. And I think that's the hardest part. And I think that there is, and I go back and forth a lot too about um if everybody that should be punished has been punished. And at this point, I can't judge you guys because it took me a long time to get there with the West Memphis 3 case. So, and I'm still talking about that case. It's been 28 years, okay? So, who am
Oh
I
my
to
god. If
say?
I'm still talking about Chris Watson 28 years, just take me out back. Like
No,
I
I'm just gonna bring you here with me and distract you with all kinds of movies, all the movies that I use as references, and you're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh god, Shmita, I write them all down. They're all I got a list. I got a list. I'm just waiting for this one person because I would really like for them to be in the chat, but, um, I can't dawdle anymore, so
think she's at work.
she's at work, but I'm gonna go ahead and play the intro, and then, we'll get started, okay? Alright, you ready? Here we go.
Yep.
Okie dokie, hopefully it goes good. All right, there you go. Happy birthday, Momo. I wanted you to see that. I was waiting, 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 waiting for you to come in because I wanted to wish you a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
The last of the Capricorns for this month. It's almost going to be Aquarius time. I think there's another week. There's another week of Capricorn, and then it's Aquarius. The 20th is the last day of Capricorn. You're welcome, sweetheart. I just want you to know how much I love you. All right. Well, listen, I'm not a big nasty like some people think I am. I got feels. Not a lot of feels. I don't show them very often, but I got them. So I try. I love these girls. They're like my family. They've been they really supported me and seen me through a lot of stuff. So I'm forever grateful, and I'm just glad that I could be here to share their birthdays with them. I love you both. And now it's time. Let's get into this trial, shall we? Okay. Hold
Sounds
on.
good.
Okay, hold on. Wait, hold on. Aw, thank you, Molson Man. Very sweet of you. Thank you so much. Hey, Max 2002. Welcome, sweetie. Glad to have you here.
Good afternoon.
I'm so glad to
I've
see
had a
you guys
discussion with every
returning.
witness
That
about
makes me
whether
so
they are
happy.
willing to or believe they can safely and responsibly testify without a mask, but I've not ordered anyone to do so. Is it your preference to remain masked at this time, or could you testify without?
I'd prefer to have it on.
Very good. Then if you can pull the microphone really close, because it does have a tendency to muffle, and we'll make sure that we can hear you and that the jury can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Could you please state and spell your name for the court?
Denise Jones, DENISEJONES.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a senior forensic scientist in the DNA analysis unit at the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory in Madison.
How long have you been employed by the Wisconsin State Crime Lab?
14 and a half years.
What are your duties and responsibilities there?
I examine evidence for the presence of biological stains, such as blood, semen, and saliva. I extract DNA from those stains and make comparisons to known individuals. I write reports on my findings, and I testify in court if necessary.
Could you tell us about your educational background?
I received my Bachelor's of Science in Biology from the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point in 2001, and I received my Master's of Science in Bacteriology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2004.
Have you received any specialized training in the field of serology, DNA, statistics, things of that sort?
Yes, I received 9 months of training on DNA analysis prior to doing casework. I also received training on statistics and star mix for about 2 months prior to doing it to casework. I'm required to take 8 hours of continuing education every year.
Have you, prior to today and previously, have you testified as an expert in court?
Yes, this is my 48th time.
Wow.
Can you tell us, we'll talk a little bit about the laboratory, the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory. Is that an accredited lab?
Yes, it is.
And what does that mean?
It means we meet accurate and reliable testing.
Do you and your lab undergo any sort of proficiency testing?
Yes, I am required to undergo 2 proficiency tests a year.
What do those consist of?
It's samples that we would see in casework.
Oh,
and
welcome.
To see if we can
Thank you,
accurately and
Crackling Rose
reliably
True
do
Crime.
DNA
Thank you for
analysis.
joining members. Thank you so much.
What is DNA?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's the DNA we inherit from our parents. We inherit 50% from our fathers and 50% from our mothers. And it codes for all structure and function in our body. And DNA is found in every cell in the body except for red blood cells. So it's found in skin cells, white blood cells, and sperm cells.
How is DNA used in forensic science?
So most of our DNA is similar person to person, but there are specific areas that distinguish us from others. And it's those areas that we look at in DNA in forensics. Everyone will have differences except identical siblings. We look at 23 of these genetic markers and one that's specific for gender.
You said everyone will have different DNA other than identical siblings.
That's correct.
Can you tell us how DNA testing is conducted at the laboratory?
Can you be a little bit more specific?
Sure. What's the steps for?
Can I just say that I don't know how high that mic volume is turned up, but I think it's very high because not only is she not muffled, but I can hear her breathing and it's a little unsettling. She sounds a little out of breath. I just wanted to point that out.
It's not as bad as Robert Durst was.
Well,
So we
It's not
have,
messing
I mean,
me
come
up.
on.
steps in the DNA analysis process.
I had to
We
like
have what's called
hold my chest
extraction,
while listening to
which
him.
we are extracting the DNA from the sample or opening up the cell to get the DNA.
Now see, Shmita,
We have quantitation, which allows us to determine how much DNA is in a sample, which will allow us to know whether or not we need to go on for further testing. And currently our kits, we can determine how much human DNA is present, how much male DNA is present, and whether or not we can detect degradation or inhibition in the sample.
Are these methods of testing and typing generally accepted by the scientific community?
Yes,
And do the majority of forensic scientists use these methods that you use?
yes.
all right, we're going to get right to it. Okay, we understand all the things.
If you need to reference anything, you can just let us know that you need to refresh your recollection, and we'll let you go ahead and do that. Just so there's a clear record, we'll just say that out loud, even though it might be a tad awkward or not normal. We'll go through this one somewhat slowly so everyone can understand maybe how these reports take form. But the first section of your report, we talk about items examined. So what did you examine here?
I examined a dried blood standard reportedly from Bart Halderson, an electric toothbrush head reportedly used by Krista Halderson, and then some samples reportedly of human remains, K1 through K6 of differing body parts, and then a buccal swab standard reportedly from Mr. Halderson.
Okay. And I'm going to show you a couple of these items just so we're talking about the same thing. I'm going to show you what's been received into evidence.
Oh, she
already in
came
this
with her
case.
own
It's
gloves.
been
Look at
labeled
her.
with the exhibit sticker 194, and it's labeled electric toothbrush head. We're not going to open it or anything, but do you see anything on there that indicates that item has been to the lab?
It has our yellow barcode.
She doesn't even want to
label with
touch
the
it. Good
case
for
number
you.
and the item number.
And the case number in this case is what?
M211575.
And what is an item number?
It's just the item that we give each item that comes into the lab.
Okay. So while the police may have labeled it with a letter or a number, and maybe in court, we put a sticker on it with a different number, you have your own system and you put your own letter to it.
Yes.
And let me just tell you, after the fact, when you're going through the reports and you see that they're denoted differently, like the police will write it as one number, and the crime lab gives it a different number. It's very difficult. It gives you a headache. I have had a headache from this before. Just saying. Okay.
Okay. And what letter is that?
Item I.
All right. Same question with the item labeled Mr. Halderson DNA spot card. What item is that?
That is M211575, item B.
For the record, we're talking about exhibit 372 and then 361. What item is that?
It's M211575, item N.
Okay. So these items come into the lab. Can you tell me just a bit, and we won't do this for each item, but when the police bring you out an item, how are they processed in? I imagine there's not just a mailbox up front, that there's some process for this.
They usually meet with an evidence specialist that will take inventory of all the items and then give them a receipt of their items. And then they create the case and all the item numbers in our LIMS system.
We'll go to the next slide. And here it says preparation for analysis. In your report, what does preparation for analysis mean?
Should I
It
skip,
means
you guys?
when I took swabbings or cuttings from each of these items, I took a portion
Yeah, a
of
little
that
bit.
item, and so
Okay,
I'm
like how much?
sub-designating.
Yeah.
What's this? Let me go back a little bit.
A and K6A. Could you remind us again, based on the report, what were those items? Where it
Okay,
says-
this is
because
where
here
the
it says, of
items
course,
are.
Human DNA not detected. What were K2A, K5A, and K6A? What were those cuttings of?
K2A was a cutting of reported left thigh tissue. And then K5A and K6A.
Is
were
this where we
swabbings
already
of the
were?
hollow area of the left and right thigh bones.
And I made this
We're
slide
a
to
little
maybe
bit more
highlight
ahead.
that. Again,
Okay,
going
should
through
I
this
go
a little
more
quickly
ahead?
For the jury.
Should I go more ahead, Shmita?
I don't know. I don't know what this part's kind of boring, but I'm afraid of missing something.
Hold on, let's watch this part. Let's
Had
see
a
this.
very high degradation rate. And if this went on for further analysis, I would likely not get something interpretable for DNA. And there were plenty of other items that were going on for further testing. So this one was not selected.
Okay. The next possible result in the further testing column is for
Well,
most
that's
of
what
them,
I
you
figured,
write,
but I
autosomal
don't know if
STL.
that's
What is
what you
that?
guys want to watch,
That means it
or
went on to amplification, which is
I don't know if this is what you guys want to, if this part is what you want to watch, or if there is like a specific timestamp in this testimony that you guys think is super pertinent and that you guys want to really hear about. So if I don't know what to do here. Shmita, juror number 3, what should we do? Tell me.
I don't know. This part's kind of boring.
Okay, but I just leave it. Okay, Amelia says leave it. Let's just leave it and see what happens. And if it gets to what else? I'm going to wait for other people to comment. I don't want. Okay, all right. So I'm just gonna play it. All right, here we go.
is the DNA making copies of itself and then going on for typing, which is taking that amplified DNA to detect a profile.
And the other option here is we see for item C2, I1, and S3A, you write unsuitable. What does unsuitable mean, and why is that different than not selected?
So in the human DNA column, I have limited human DNA, and I also have limited male DNA. And based on those results, they were below our threshold for samples to go on for further analysis. So these samples were not taken for further analysis, so no DNA profile was developed from these items.
Okay. The next item we're going to look at is, and I'll have the detective, if he wants to grab Mr. Halderson's buckle, and I'll approach you with that. But you had, from your July 29th report, you had some standards, meaning you had the single source profile of Bart Halderson and Mitchell Halderson.
Yes.
Okay. And you, based on the toothbrush head in your analysis, you believed you had Krista Halderson.
Yes.
Okay. And in this report, September 1st, you were provided a buccal swab purportedly obtained from Chandler Halderson.
Yes. Okay. Judge, can we approach real quick?
Yes.
See, I thought it was Brooks Brothers shoes that they thought he was wearing, that they were hidden. Not like hidden, but they weren't in plain sight. They were like under the shelving.
Look at how close they're talking, though, with no masks, like the prosecution and the defense.
And now, and Chandler Halderson has the COVID, so now that's kind of scary.
And I know we've looked at the other swabs previously, or the source profiles, but could you tell me, I'm showing you it's been marked as exhibit number 360. Could you tell me what that is?
That's the crime lab's item designation M211575, item P.
And what does this appear to be to you?
A buccal swab standard from Chandler Halderson.
Are we going to get a DNA test? Is this where we finally settle it? Was he adopted or not?
Ooh,
At
maybe.
that point, you did some analysis on all of these items using those source profiles. Is that correct?
I made comparisons from the buccal swab standards to the evidence profiles developed.
Okay. And we're going to talk about those. Why are some of these grouped up in maybe one major result and some of them separated out individually?
This one was grouped together because it was the same male profile was detected from all of these items. So we like to group them together to kind of condense the report so it's not even longer than it already is.
Okay. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And so I'm going to show you some items, but let's start with here. You say the swabbings from the stains. I think you testified there was blood on item C2, and there were some sub designations there. D1, G1, and H1. What do those sub-designations mean again?
They're just different areas of the tarps that I swabbed, and then the cuttings that I took from those swabs that I took from the tarp.
And what was your conclusion related to the stains on that tarp that was found in the garbage cans, at least the swabs C2, D1, C2, G1, and C2, H1?
They were single source male profiles from the same individual.
And who was that individual?
Bart Halderson was the source.
Is there any numerical value attached to when you say someone is the source?
For us to consider someone the source, the profile that the stat that we calculate, the profile has to be rarer than 1 in 7 trillion individuals, which is 1,000 times the world's population.
1 in 7 trillion?
You say Krista, Mitchell, and
That's what
Chandler
she
are
said.
excluded. What does it mean for someone to be excluded?
They are not the source of that profile.
And the last line, additional possible trace alleles were detected, and it goes on. What does that line mean?
It means when I was analyzing the data from items F2 and L1, there were a couple minor types seen that I couldn't really say anything about. They could be just non-true peaks or artifacts from the amplification project. So they're trace alleles, and I'm not making any conclusions on those.
Okay, excellent. And the next item that's in this grouping is the swabbing of the staining. I think you've already testified about on the teeth blade of the handsaw, item F2.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to have the detective who's masked and gloved up with clean gloves, I would imagine, remove F2 from the box and just display to the jury. So we're recalling the same item. And first, I'll have the analyst look at that. Is that, in fact, the item that we're talking about?
Yes.
And I'll have the detective just remove that, and I'll ask you some questions about it.
Oh, I know, Alley 79. I can't even. My brain won't allow me to go there.
And I'll have him walk in front of the jury, and I'll ask you a couple of questions. What was your conclusion related to the swabbing of the staining on that saw? And I think it's been testified, purportedly recovered at the Irwin Road property.
It was a single source male profile.
And who was that profile?
Bart Halderson was
And-
the source of that profile.
And that numerical value you gave previously, same answer for this one?
Yes.
Wow.
So I'll ask the detective to re-glove at this point. The next item we'll talk about, and just to make sure we're all looking at the same thing, we'll remove it again. You swabbed the stains on the clippers, or the ends of the pruning shears, which is item G3.
Yes.
Okay.
I like that they're regloving, because should there ever be an appeal and things have to go back for analysis, they can't, they won't be contaminated. This is the proper procedure, and I'm pleased to see this.
Yeah, this is what I meant by, like, it took them a while between.
Yeah. Look at her
between them,
watching
but it
him.
is good.
Look at her. She's like, are you going to get those gloves or what, homeboy?
All right. So first we'll show you the box. Is that
She's
in
really
fact the item
blinking.
that we're discussing?
Yes.
Where's the
And I'll have
behavior
detective
panel when you
display it to
need
the
him?
jury
What's
while
up
I ask you
blinks
the
mean?
question.
Because her blinking certainly intensified. Oh, my.
Item G3, what were your conclusions as to that item?
It was a single source male profile, and Bart Halderson was the source of that profile.
So does that
What?
mean that his mom's DNA wasn't on?
Yes, yes, that's what that
So he used
means.
different techniques. Okay, all right.
Right.
I
Yeah.
can't imagine. I can't imagine what he would use
Return
those
that
for,
item to the
though.
box.
Pruning shears? What
Yeah,
do
like what is he
pruning
doing?
shears?
Cutting off a toe? Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't use it for the head. You wouldn't use it
No,
for
no,
the arm.
yeah, probably, yeah, exactly what you said. Hmm.
Next,
Or
there are
maybe his
two items as
fingers
the detective gets
for
ready.
fingerprint.
L1 and
Who
M1.
knows?
You list them
Probably
as metal
hands, honey,
fragments, but you say something that we haven't seen yet, which is
Ugh.
washings of. What does that
at
mean?
the wrist.
Washing of something.
That means the item was small enough that I could actually place the item in a tube and add reagent to it. And it's what we call a washing because it's not a swabbing and it's not a cutting of. We're washing that item to recover any DNA that may be from it. And then we remove the item from the liquid. And then that goes on for DNA extraction.
I think this
Do you find that to
testimony
be a
actually
reliable
makes things
method?
worse.
Yes, we use it in other items of evidence too.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we're going to show you what's been marked. Again, we're not opening these. Show you what's been marked.
All
in
right,
this
well,
case
Mo,
is exhibit number
whenever you're ready, if
285
there's
and
specific things
286.
that you want me
We
to
testified from
talk about, and
investigator
if I don't
Leatherberry of
notice it,
metal
point
fragments
it out to
recovered
me,
from
babe, and
the,
I'll be more than
uh,
happy to.
basement of the Halderson
Promise,
home. Are those
promise.
the items that we're discussing?
Yes,
And
Birthday
did
girl.
you in fact wash those items?
yes, I did.
Were these items you were able to perform blood tests on?
No, based on the limited amount of sample size, it went on for DNA analysis.
And what was the result of the DNA analysis on items L1 and M1, which is also, I guess for our purposes, exhibits 285 and 286?
They were single source male profiles from the same individual, and Bart Halderson was the source of that profile.
Next, and we're just going to go through the whole report, even when it maybe didn't lead to anything. Here you indicate the swab from the stain on the tarp, item C2E1. Was this another stain you found on the tarp?
Yes,
And for everyone's purposes, is item C and then C2 the sub-designation?
yes.
And you say partial low-level profile not suitable for comparisons due to limited amount of genetic information. Just explain that for us.
So sometimes when we develop DNA profiles, sometimes we don't get great profiles. And in this case, that was the instance where I didn't get anything that I could really make any conclusions on. So our procedure is to say a partial low-level profile and not make any comparisons to it.
You were able to find some comparisons, however, with other areas of that same tarp.
Yes,
Okay. And so now we're looking at your testing done on item C2F1, which we talk about the tarp.
The tarp.
Talking about the one in the garbage can, right?
All right,
yes.
hold on.
Okay.
Let me push pause.
And what conclusions did
Okay, so is there something specific about that you want me to address or what I think about it? Because I don't want to just talk to talk. I mean, I know what I think but you want to know, but I want to make sure that I understand your question before I say something. It is, Allie, you're right. It's very well, we can get into that, Max, while I wait for Mo to answer me. So you have to think about the order in which this was done, and I'm going to have to choose my words very, very carefully with the YouTubes. You know how they like to play. So would there be a lot? I think most people would think of I think when people think of it in terms of what was done, they're expecting for there to be a burst or a spatter or a gush. But the thing of it is that it was done post mortem, so the blood is no longer circulating because the heart is no longer pumping. And so rather than the gush that you get like when you see it on TV or whatever, when you hit an artery and stuff like that, it sprays that way because the blood is pumping. There's pressure behind it. But in this situation, there wouldn't be. So most likely what would happen is, yes, the human body contains the amount of blood it contains, but it wouldn't be a gush or a spray. It'd be more like a leak, which when they were doing the testimony just now over the tarp, okay, what they're saying is that the tarp itself is called item C, and then each little spot that they found is numbered C1, 2, like that, right? Or A, B, or however they did it, right? I think, Mo, the reason why they weren't able to get enough of a sample from the tarp is because likely a tarp did exactly what it was supposed to do in this situation, and it was to absorb. And so, and then it was left. So there's like degradation to the DNA, and sometimes it just doesn't, there's just not enough of a sample, even with amplification, for them to get a full DNA profile from it. So I think if that's what you're asking me. And I know I forgot that you're at work. I'm sorry. She's at work. Thank you for reminding me of that with your question, Shmita. Okay, let's carry on. What is happening?
Did you reach
There we
regarding
go.
that staining?
I detected a single source female profile, and Crystal Halderson was the source.
Oh, hold on. I'll answer
Same
that.
numerical.
Okay. So the tarp was found inside of a trash can out at the farm. That's where that was.
Full value that you previously.
Near the torso, I think.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What is StarMix?
StarMix is a probabilistic genotyping software that we use in the lab, and it has the ability to deconvolute complex mixtures and then perform likelihood ratio calculations on those profiles when given a standard for reference.
And because of my question, perhaps we're about to see some of that testing done in this case, so those results, correct?
Yes.
All right. Can you explain what a likelihood ratio is?
If you want to go to the next slide, I can.
Sure. So here, for everyone's purposes, we're looking at StarMix slide from your lab report labeled swab from stain near where
I
tooth
actually
was
think
inside
this,
garbage
hold on,
bin
I'm going to push
and
pause
item
real quick.
C1.
I actually think this testimony is very helpful in that it now obviously it tells us the results of the DNA, right? What was found on what, but more than that, I think it goes to. I was under the impression that he used the tools, the same tools on both of his parents, but these tests are showing something different than that. So I think it actually makes what he did worse, if that was even possible. All right, let's keep going.
Well, it makes you wonder how. Like, what was the cause of
So
death
a
for the mom?
likelihood rate.
Well, what do you mean? Like what was what?
What the cause of death was for the mom? Like,
Yeah.
it's, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
he's clearly insane. So who
Yeah.
knows what he's capable of?
Right. But I just think using I don't know. I would have expected the results to show a mixture on the tools, like the saw and stuff like that. I would have expected there to be a combination of both hers and his DNA, and there wasn't. And I think I'm a little flabbergasted by that, and I'm having a little trouble with my words. So I'm just going to push play and be quiet for a while.
Ratio is a ratio of two different hypotheses, and the statistic calculated gives support for one hypothesis over the other. So in this case, the top part of the table, it says H1. That's the first hypothesis, and that consists usually of the person of interest and an unknown individual, because in this case, it's a two-person mixture. So the person of interest and an unknown individual. And then the second hypothesis is that it's two unknown individuals.
How do you construct those likelihood ratio proportions?
It's based on the case information that we were given. And like I said, H1 is usually a hypothesis that the person of interest is included in that. And H2 is a hypothesis where the person of interest is not included.
And when you say person of interest, do you mean any of these standards being the person of interest?
Yes, on the left side of the table, each standard that I made a comparison to, they're listed. So it's Bart Halderson, Krista
Hey,
Halderson,
Nonstop Mom,
Mitchell
welcome. Glad to
Halderson, and
see you.
Chandler
Thanks for coming
Halderson.
back.
Each of their standards were compared to the evidence profile in this
It
case.
does, Max. It does. And we're going
In
to
this
go
case,
over
you
that
use Star Mix?
Yes.
Can you tell us why?
stuff on Saturday with Dr. B. She's
Based
most
on our
anxious to
procedure
talk about it
manual,
with us.
I needed
So
to
we're
use
going to
Star
wait for
Mix
her.
in this case.
Sure. What is the mathematical process used by StarMix?
The mathematical processes are random resampling, and to be able to best explain the data and all the possible genotypes that could be part of this profile.
Are the methods you've described here for StarMix, are they generally
Oh, no,
accepted
babe, you don't
by
have to
people who
zip.
do what you do
Don't
for a
you
living?
worry about that,
Yes.
Max. You guys, you know how
So
I
let's
roll.
start
You
talking
just talk
about
about
it.
what you
And
want in the chat. It's fine.
So as we go through, we're going to see
I just
some of
wanted
the
to
more
let you know that
simple
we're going to
line
talk
results,
about
and then
that.
maybe
So
we're
we're
see
going to
some
go
more
over it.
complex ones. This is
If,
StarMix.
you know, in case you
Yes.
want to like mark your calendar to be
When
here
we're
or
looking at
something.
this, let's start from the top. We're talking about a stain near where the tape was inside item C one, this large box here. And tell us what the jury is looking at here.
So you're looking at the table of the results and the conclusions from this. The first part says that it was a partial low-level two-person mixture. So when I was doing the analysis of the profile, I determined that more than one person contributed to this profile. And I knew that at least one male was included. So then that information is given to StarMix, and it deconvolutes the mixture and lets me know if it's has good results that I can go and do statistics from standards on. And in this case, it did. And then I have each standard compared to that profile, and it gives me a statistic of whether or not they can be included or excluded or uninformative.
In dealing with a situation in which every person of interest, and not using the term person of interest as a police officer might, and as I think you robbed the Walmart, as in person of interest meaning the person who you believe possibly might be have their DNA included in this mix. Sometimes is it possible to see people who are biologically related have small support or moderate support for inclusion?
Yes, it's possible.
And I think when you started talking at the beginning, you indicated that we get our DNA from our parents.
Yes.
And just what amount of DNA do you get from your parents?
You get 50% from your fathers and 50% from your mother.
And here you reach some sort of qualifier as to your
No,
conclusion.
Nonstop,
Very strong
Mom, no,
support,
we have not.
informative, moderate support, things of that sort.
I have no
Yes.
clue.
Okay.
I have no
Let's start
idea.
at the
And
top. For
usually I'm
Mr.
good at
Bart
that, and I
Halderson,
can't.
related to
I
the staining on where the
can't.
tape was inside the garbage bin.
This is
What was your
interesting.
That it was at least 43 billion times more likely to observe this DNA profile as a mixture from H1, which is person of interest plus unknown, than if it's a mixture resulting from H2, which is from two unknown individuals.
And Krista, it's uninformative,
Yes,
meaning
I'm not making any type of conclusions on if they're included or excluded based on the statistic calculated.
and for Mitchell Halderson, it's indicated as moderate support for inclusion.
Yes,
And explain again, if you could, what moderate support for inclusion means.
the moderate support for inclusion was developed when we did our validation, and it was determined that
Allie, I agree.
it was a support for inclusion, but it was just above our cutoff
What is
for
what is that cutoff?
1,000.
And what is Mitchell
2,670 times more likely.
compared to where you find very strong support with Bart? It was 43 billion times more likely.
Yes,
Okay. And lastly, for Chandler Halderson, you wrote uninformative.
yes.
All right. Here now we're talking about the scissors, and we'll do the same process as we're talking through this. I'll have the detective glove up.
See, I don't understand that. Let me push pause real quick. Hold on a sec. Did you guys understand that?
And
What
first I'll
she
have them
just said?
No.
Okay. I think what she just said is that on a specific item, there was a mixture. Okay. And when she ran the analysis, essentially, uh, Bart Holderson was statistically like a 11 billion times more likely to be included. Krista was not. Mitchell was, but Chandler wasn't.
Right?
And hey Seth, how's it going? Yeah, the older brother. Well, I feel like okay, that could be a good point. Max 2002. We have to see what the other results say. That I would think it would make sense that the mixture would be Bart and Chandler because a lot of people hurt themselves, right? However, um, the fact that it doesn't include Chandler, but instead includes Mitchell, I just I wasn't prepared for that. I'm gonna have to. Hopefully, she breaks it down a little simpler because I'm not. I mean, it just barely included him. You know what I'm saying? So I just I think it's interesting. Let's keep going to find out what this means.
Show you the box where we're talking about item D1.
That is
The
really
jury's
what it's
purpose,
looking
that's been
like,
marked
because
as
he
exhibit
should
number
at least be
142 in our case.
included in
Is
that
the
because you
item
get
labeled
50%
scissors that
from
I
your
think you previously talked about some of the blood
well,
you found.
Yes.
All right, we'll go ahead and
it
have the
means
detective
that
display
Bart
those for the
and
jury.
Chandler are not blood related. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that
And
Chandler
I'll
is
answer some
not.
questions. Same
Huh?
4 possible persons of interest.
Maybe there was
and
a
using star mix, and what were your results?
milkman involved.
Swabbing from the
I don't
handles of
know.
the scissors, I detected a 2-person mixture with at least one male.
And did you reach some conclusions regarding those persons of interest?
Bart Halderson was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the profile if it is a mixture of H1 than it is a mixture of H2.
Okay. And Krista Halderson?
The same result.
At least 1 quadrillion more likely to observe that profile than an unknown person?
Yes.
The number quadrillion is a large number.
Yes.
How large of a number is that?
It's a 1 with 15 zeros after it.
And here, Mitchell and Chandler.
As Jen says,
excluded?
11 billion.
We don't need to display it again, but here, obviously, there was some additional staining on the scissors, item D2.
Yes, I took swabbings from the staining on the blade of the scissors.
Okay. And jury already saw that with the scissors, but what were your conclusions or reached here?
It was a 2-person mixture with at least 1 male. Again, Bart Halderson was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe this DNA profile as a mixture of H1 than if it is H2. Krista Halderson, it was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe this DNA profile as a mixture resulting from H1 than if it is a mixture resulting from H2. Mitchell Halderson was excluded and Chandler Halderson was excluded.
Okay. Next item we're going to talk about, and we'll have the detective assist us, is your item E1 for purposes of the jury. We're talking about item or exhibit 141, which is the broken saw blade. I believe testimony was reportedly recovered from the Irwin Road property. So we'll have the detective just pull that out as we discuss it.
Yes.
I'm so confused. Jen, are you talking, babe? Because you're muted.
Thank you. I was muted the whole time. Thank you,
I
Shanita.
was like,
Okay. All right, hold on.
oh,
Let me break
like
this down.
muted?
I get it. I get this question. All right. So Mo says, that's what I'm confused about, Max, because they should be going by his buccal swabs. So it's confusing. Chandler is excluded on all, I think. Okay. So now that I'm no longer muted and I'm acting right, here we go. When Chandler and Mitchell gave their buccal swabs, okay, those are considered known DNA samples, okay? So they take the buccal swab, they process it, their DNA is then, for lack of a better word, logged into the system because there is a known contributor. Everything else with respect to the blood on the tarp, on the scissors, on the all the things, right? Then it's compared. And because they already have their DNA sequence and it's known, then they can either be included or excluded. So they are using the buccal swab for comparison. They're using that known genetic profile up against the results of what's coming out as far what they're testing it against, which would be the thing like blood from the various the scissors, the saw, et cetera, et cetera. I am not quite sure about all of this excluding thing with some of these mixtures, why Mitchell would be included, yet Chandler would not be. If you get half of your DNA from your mom and half of your DNA from your dad, which we all know, we all learned that in science class, then it appears that at least from the one thing we just saw, that Chandler is not blood related to Bart. Not, it doesn't mean anything about Krista just yet. We haven't seen those yet. So let's keep going and see what we can find out. And then I'm probably going to head up the Googles after this and maybe have a better, more informative answer.
And you were answering the question, is that in fact the item E1 from the lab?
Yes.
Okay, we'll have the detective remove it. And as he carefully does that, tell me about your conclusions using StarMix here.
So I detected a partial low-level two-person mixture with at least one male. Bart Halderson, the result was very strong support for inclusion, and it was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile as a mixture resulting from H1 than if it's a mixture resulting from H2.
And then Krista, Mitchell, and Chandler were uninformative.
Yes.
Next, we're going to talk about the all-way handsaw. I think you labeled it item F, so Frank, and then sub-designated F1 was the swabbing you took.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And,
Allie,
for
I'm
everyone's
with you.
purposes,
I
that's
need the
exhibit
crayons and
140.
pictures. No, but I think I'm understanding this. But I can't imagine having to be like if I couldn't talk it out with you guys. I don't know. Maybe I'm not cut out to be a juror.
And they're not
So,
allowed to talk
obviously, the
with each
detective wants to
other
change his
until
mind.
delivery,
But we'll
right?
have him
Yeah,
show you,
they can't
exhibit
say
number
anything. I mean, they
140
can
for
say
our
hi.
purposes.
They can't
Is that
discuss
item
the
F for
case.
your
Like they don't
purposes?
have to just be
Yes.
silent to each
We'll have
other.
the detective open
Yeah.
that up, display it for the jury. And while you describe the results, what were your results on item F1?
I detected a two-person mixture with at least one male.
Seth, we all got to leave that
Bart
island
Halderson
sometime,
had
and
very
now's as
strong
good a
support
time
for
as any.
inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it's a mixture resulting from H1 than resulting from H2. Krista Halderson, it was very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile as a mixture from H1 than from H2. And Mitchell Halderson and Chandler Halderson were excluded.
I mean, honestly,
Next,
we really
of course,
are,
the
Seth. You're
detective
going to get support
go through the
over here for
process
that.
of
This
changing
is our
gloves.
way
We're
of
gonna talk
moving on.
about item G. In this case, which is the pruning shears for the jury's purposes, exhibit number 139, purportedly recovered from the Irwin Road property, I believe is the testimony. And we'll have the detective, one second. And we'll have the detective continue to show them, but we're going to start talking about the results because there's numerous results as to this one. Tell us about item G1.
G1 was the swapping of the black rubber handle on the pruning shears. I detected a 2-person mixture with at least one male. And the results for each individual was Bart Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if it was a mixture from H1 than if it was a mixture resulting from H2. Krista Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if it is a mixture resulting from H1 than if it's a mixture resulting from H2. Mitchell Halderson was excluded and Chandler Halderson was excluded.
Okay, briefly, the detective's going to open the box. I know we've all seen it before, but I just want to make sure everyone's seeing the same thing. That's your item that we're talking about?
Yes.
All right, we'll go to the other swabbing you took from there, which was G2. What did you find here?
Again, it was a swabbing of the staining on the red metal handle portion of the pruning shears. It was a 2-person mixture and at least 1 male.
I see.
Bart Halderson
Okay,
had
I'm
very strong
understanding
support
this
for
now.
inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if it is a mixture resulting from H1 than if it is a mixture resulting from H2. Krista Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It is at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if it is a mixture resulting from H1 than if it's a mixture resulting from H2. Mitchell Halderson was excluded and Chandler Halderson was excluded.
Excellent. And the detective will repackage that and you can take a seat for a second. Next, we're going to talk about this item, I think been referred to as the barn tarp, item S1 that you previously looked at. You performed this work on this item, on the stainings on the barn tarp. What were you able to conclude?
The swab from the stain on the barn tarp was a 2-person mixture and at least 1 male. Bart Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if it was a mixture from H1 than if it's a mixture resulting from H2. Krista Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if it was a mixture resulting from H1 than if it's a mixture resulting from H2. Mitchell Halderson was excluded and Chandler Halderson was excluded.
Okay. And we don't have to read it again, but you did another swab from the same tarp, correct?
Are we all following along? Everybody now, is it making sense to you guys now? Now it's making sense to me. So is that making sense to you, Shmita? How you doing?
I am a little confused,
Okay.
but like, because some of them it excludes Chandler and Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand.
Okay, so the reason, okay, so if you look at the top here, it tells you from what area this swab came from. Okay, and the last 2 things they talked about were from the handles of the pruning shears. Okay, and there was a mixture of DNA found on those, 1 male, 1 female. Okay, and the DNA that was found on those came from Bart and Krista, not Mitchell and not Chandler. So see how now we're starting to see that the tools are now in some places are having a mixture. So he did use the tools on both of them. You see what I'm saying? Where at first I was thinking he didn't, he did.
Mm-hmm.
But their DNA is not on there, likely because for a couple of reasons. One, Mitchell never touched those pruning shears. Number 1, that could be it, right? And number 2 is the reason that Chandler's DNA is not on there is because he wore gloves. Because they tested the handles.
Mm.
So think about what occurred in your brain, okay, and what would be potentially running down those handles, which is probably where the DNA came from. Okay, Is it clicking now? Okay. All right.
It's
We're all
all my synapses are starting to
yeah.
fire.
You see, it's like like the Matrix. Hey, Dan Sims, how you doing? Glad to have you back. It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's what they're doing. Okay. All right. Looky here.
Okay,
Jen
okay,
might
yeah.
actually have some smarts. And guess who else has smarts? Shmita, because she's getting it.
Yes.
Again.
And that has identical
And
results.
look, she just answered yes.
Bart and Krista, each 1 quadrillion times more likely to be observed than anyone else. There's a random person.
Well, there you go, Momo.
It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if it was a mixture resulting from H1 than H2.
Okay. You then performed another report in this case. So that's exhibit number 418, correct?
Yes.
I'll hand you that report for reference. Same format. You examined a lot of items.
Yes.
11 billion or
However,
50, 1100 or
many of
4?
these are swabs, correct? That we're looking at here.
I'd say half are swabs. The other half were bags labeled.
Okay. First thing in your report is items you identified blood on.
Yes.
All right. Let's talk about those briefly. There's items starting with the letter W labeled paper towels. What were those?
Paper towels.
Yeah. And what do you have a description in general for item W?
There was a box containing several bags of what
We needed
What?
that.
That contained paper towels.
Okay. And you were able to identify blood on that?
There's a
On
thing
4 of them I
labeled
tested.
paper towels. And what was
There was
that?
blood.
Paper towels.
Next, we have a swab reportedly recovered from a family room. Swab G, a family room. These items labeled G by the investigators.
I'm
that were
just
involved
so
in the
glad to
case.
see all these
Yes.
all
And
these
you
returning
sub-designated
faces.
or
It makes me
designated
so happy.
X6.
Yes, there were 7 or 8 swabs in that one item submitted.
Next, you were able to identify blood on the axe, item AC.
Yes.
Oh
Okay.
crap!
And
I
this
didn't
one
know
I'll
there
actually
was an
want to look at.
actual
I'll have the
axe.
detective come up.
Y'all.
You can grab that. I'll actually move some of this out of his way.
Your girl's a little flabbergasted.
Like, I can't help but think, like, why is he axe?
I'm gonna have the detective show you.
Yeah, not
Like, for
Michelle.
me, I'd be
Item
like,
AC.
chainsaw, like,
You just let us know.
I feel like he couldn't.
Have the
You know
stickers
what?
from your
Hold on, let
lab,
me push pause
labeled
because
as
I was
that
thinking
item.
about that too.
You can take a look at that if you need to get up. That's fine.
Chainsaws are noisy, and they run on gas. So I would think draw attention if it was coming from inside of the home. So I'm thinking he's doing things very quietly. Know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
but a fire going in the middle of July isn't
Listen. And the thing of it is, how come there's so many paper products, Chandler, that they found? You had 2 fireplaces.
yeah. Dummy.
Maniac. Well,
It has our label M21-1575 AC on the box.
holy moly, what
And
fresh hell
we'll
is
pause on
this?
opening that until we get to the section and talk about.
That's what
I
I
think
think,
that's the
Navigator.
But where on that item were you able to locate blood?
Do you mind if I refer to my notes?
Absolutely.
No, you cannot. Look at the paper towels. I mean,
Yeah, a gunshot is loud too. That's true. Yeah.
that's a good point.
I did the testing to confirm for blood on the staining near the hilt of the axe.
How would you describe where the hilt is?
It's where the axe head and the handle meet.
Oh, see, I didn't know what that would be called,
Next,
but
some shoes recovered in this case. You labeled as items AD1 and AD2.
oh,
You
Dan,
found
perish
blood
the
on those
thought.
shoes?
No, we'll find something for
Yes.
you
Can you
to
tell us
do.
whereabouts on those shoes?
Don't you
found blood?
worry. There's
The
got to be
bottoms of
another
the shoes.
trial that's going to
And
come
I'll have
up in the
detective,
interim.
just show you what's been marked and received in this case.
I can't
if you can
believe
look
the
and see if your
audacity
lab
of Chandler to
sticker is
get
in fact on
the
there.
vid. So rude.
Yes, it is.
There were
Although
some
it is
jeans or
giving us
pants
time
that
to
you
catch
labeled
up.
as AE, and you recovered blood there.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is the difference between blood identified in this report and this next section, which we hadn't seen before, which is presumptive testing for blood positive, however, could not be confirmed?
I know, Navigator. I
So
know.
presumptive testing
But I
for
think
blood
he lived in
is
a neighborhood of
what
mind
a
your
lot
own
of people are
business,
familiar
except
with.
for all
It's
the
the
cameras.
chemical test. And if blood is indicated, it will turn pink. And then I went to do the confirmatory test for blood, and I did not see 2 lines. I only had 1 line. So I could say that it was presumptive for blood was positive, but I could not confirm blood on those items.
Okay. And those items were a swab from the living room fireplace and a swab from the south side basement area?
Oh, you know what,
Yes.
Lupe? You're
And then what is the
absolutely
next section?
correct.
Just presumptive testing for blood
See?
positive. And what's different from the blood was identified section?
So presumptive testing for blood was positive on the paper towels and the swabs
Yeah,
listed.
nonstop mom.
But I
like,
didn't take
yeah.
those on to do a confirmatory test. I took a representative sampling to confirm for blood. And the rest of these items just had the presumptive testing done.
Lindsay, we're going to mark an exhibit if you have the sticker. And those items, paper towels, swab from the family room. There were some swabs from the fireplace and south side basement area.
Yes,
Okay. Same as before. You prepared the items for analysis, meaning you swabbed them or did the cuttings, and you did some analysis. Here, the first couple are unsuitable. Again, remind us what that means.
just means I didn't detect any DNA, so I couldn't go on for further analysis.
The only
and
smart thing
however, you
he
were
did
able to
with
perform
respect
some
to the
analysis
retired
on,
officer
a
across
good
the
deal of
street
these
was
items.
not take him up on his
Yes.
offer to help with the dogs in the house. That was a good, don't invite the cop over to the house.
Let's start with this one. A swab from the living room, or the family room, excuse me.
Yeah, I think he's only 5'10",
X1A,
Allie.
and the swabbing from the stain on the sole of the shoe that you had, item AD2B. Tell me what your conclusions were here.
They were single source mail profiles from the same individual, and Bart Halderson was the source of those profiles.
For the jury's purpose,
I don't know what those are. Team psych word.
some of the
I mean, like the black cats?
swabs we're talking about here came from the fireplace. The investigator Leatherberry testified to some of those. But here we're talking about the shoe and a swabbing from the family room. And you identified Mr. Halderson?
Yes,
Same numerical value as you previously talked about, being 1 in 7 trillion.
yes.
And is this for all blood?
Swab from the family room, item X2
Let
through
me look.
X7.
Hold on. Let me look at the
and,
actual footage.
Cuttings from the stain on the jeans, item AE2 and AE3. You were able to observe, or able to determine a single source mail profile. Tell me those results.
Detected a single source mail profile from the same individual.
If it's
Chandler
a stain,
M.
I would think
Halderson was
yes,
the source
blood.
of those profiles.
Okay. That makes sense.
And you use the phrase family
Are you
room.
talking about the
Were
mortar
you aware
ones?
that was the designation being used by the investigators in certain
Well,
areas?
obviously.
They were calling it as basically their family room.
Never
things of that
mind.
sort.
Yes, whatever they had written on the transmittal is what we used for our description.
Next, we'll talk about swab from the north side of the basement, items Y1A, Y3A, Y5A, and Y6A. Here, these were swabs taken from the same general area. Is that your understanding?
Yes,
Okay. And did you perform some analysis on them?
yes, I was able to detect single source female profiles from the same individual, and Krista Halderson was the source of those profiles.
Were you able to perform blood testing on that swab?
On those swabs?
Yes.
No, I did not perform blood testing on those swabs.
Can you tell us why not?
There wasn't very much staining on those items when I examined them. And I talked to Detective Leatherberry.
No, it's interesting, Dan,
whether
about the
they
Ring
wanted
doorbell. They
blood
did turn it down. I
identified
remember
or
reading that.
to go on for DNA analysis.
That's crazy.
And per a conversation with him, he said he had done some blood testing on one of the items. And then the other ones I would just do DNA analysis on.
And were these, were you aware they were swabs of blood pattern that was on a safe in the basement?
I knew they were from a safe, but I didn't know what they were of.
Okay. And did you rely on Mr. Leatherberry's representations then, or at least in determining whether DNA was more important at that time? Is that how you made your decision?
Yes.
Next.
Is there
Talk
going to
about
be
the swab,
cross, Shmita?
from the living room fireplace, item
Pardon?
N. And
Is
so
there
for the
gonna be
jury's
cross?
purposes, I suppose I put it up there.
I
Item
don't
N
think
being
there
maybe it's
was. And if there was,
Item
it was
N,
like one or two
what are we
questions.
looking at there for
Oh, for
result?
Pete's sake.
I had a partial low-level
I
male
tried not to
profile
listen.
detected.
I know,
and was
babe. I
comparing
just
the
thought
standards.
you maybe you could
Halderson
see.
was
You
the
know what I
source of
mean?
that profile.
Yeah.
Crap,
Next, we'll talk
that's
about the
what that
south
is.
side basement area. I believe it was labeled F by some of the investigators involved there. What were
Okay,
you
so
able to
yeah,
determine?
these are where they swabbed
I
inside of
detected
the
a
house
partial low-level
for
three-person
blood.
mixture, but this profile was unsuitable for comparisons due to the limited amount of genetic information and the complexity of the mixture.
Now we're going to look at some star mix results again.
Yes.
Okay. Here, talking about living room fireplace, item O. And what were you able to determine based on the swabbing from item O?
I detected a partial low-level three-person mixture in at least one male. Bart Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it was a mixture from Bart Halderson and 2 unknown individuals, or H1, than if it was a mixture resulting from 3 unknown individuals, or H2. Krista Halderson had strong support for inclusion. It was at least 10,000 times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it was a mixture resulting from H1 than if it was a mixture resulting from H2. Mitchell Halderson was uninformative, and it was 2,940 times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it was a mixture from Chandler Halderson and 2 unknown individuals than if it was a mixture resulting from 3 unknown individuals, which is a moderate support for inclusion.
Okay, because Mo, that would be a standard thing to do. Criminality. Now, I thought we talked about this. You were going to put it in your spreadsheet. Okay, so the
That's it.
reason
Being called crim.
they have to test everything is sent to the lab for testing while the investigation continues. So they take a buccal swab from Chandler, they take a buccal swab from Mitchell, right? They send it off to the lab. And in the meantime, while they're waiting for the lab to do their results or the results to be given, then they would go about verifying where Mitchell said he was. So that's why they do that. Oh, thank you, Seth. That's so sweet of you. You're welcome. You're always welcome here. I try to be inclusive. Everybody's welcome, as long as they are respectful, and you're always respectful. So yeah, that's why they would do that, Mo, because in the initial days of the investigation, police have an inkling of what happened, but remember we talked about this, knowing and proving are 2 different things. So they just rule everybody is a suspect until they're no longer a suspect. All right, I'm hitting play. Here we go.
Now we're going to talk about the swab. I think Mr. Leatherberry testified yesterday, area G, that he was able to identify. You did star mix on it. What were your conclusions?
I detected a partial low-level 2-person mixture that contained at least 1 male. Bart Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe this DNA profile was a mixture resulting from H1 than if it was a mixture resulting from H2. Krista Halderson was uninformative. It was at least 1,280 times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it was a mixture resulting from H1 than a mixture resulting from H2, which was a moderate support for inclusion, and Chandler Halderson was uninformative.
Next, and we'll get the item out again, just so we're looking at the same thing. Swabbing on the staining of the axe head. I think you testified previously to various areas of the axe head that were tested, but let's start with this one, item AC1. So when you swabbed near the axe head, tell us what your results were.
I did 2-person mixture that it contained at least 1 male. Bart Halderson had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 1 quadrillion times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it was a mixture resulting from H1 than if it was a mixture resulting from H2. Krista Halderson also had very strong support for inclusion. It was at least 106 million times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it was a mixture resulting from H1 than if it was a mixture resulting from H2. Mitchell Halderson had moderate support for exclusion. It was 2,600 times more likely to observe this mixture if it was resulting from H2 than if it was a mixture resulting from H1. And Chandler Halderson was uninformative.
AC2, near the hilt of the axe handle, is this where you said you were able to detect blood?
I identified blood, yes.
Could you point for the jury, I know we described it previously, without touching it, the detectives holding the axe, where is, in fact, the area in which you were able to identify blood?
There's a silver circle near where the axe head and the handle meet, and that's where I swapped.
Okay.
It just seems so extra, like an extra amount of work for a kid who didn't want to get a job.
You've been reading a lot, but there you found a 2-person mixture with at least 1 male, and then you
yes, nonstop, Mom. We're still on the axe.
Very strong support for inclusion.
Yes.
Krista Halderson, very strong support for inclusion.
Yes.
And you excluded both Mitchell and Chandler.
Yes.
You then swabbed the top part of the axe, item AC3. There, you reached conclusions. Very strong support for inclusion for Bart.
Yes.
Very strong support for Krista.
Yes.
And you excluded both Mitchell and Chandler.
Yes.
Next, we're going to talk about a pair of shoes. And I'll have the detective, if you could, in a second, walk up with a pair of shoes. In fact, they're already up there. Here in this case, you were asked to identify or to examine a pair of Brooks shoes that were brought to the crime lab.
Yes.
And are you aware that other disciplines at the crime lab, people who do footwear testing and things of that sort, they were also involved?
Yes.
Just might be a good break or a good time to ask you. A lot of different disciplines work together at the crime lab.
Yes.
Fingerprints, footwear analysis, trace evidence, DNA, things like that?
Yes.
How do you decide what order things are tested when they come in? We plop this on your desk one day. Who goes first?
It depends on what the question is being asked of us to find. Some cases, if there's biological staining, we'll take our samples first, because sometimes the process for latent prints could destroy any DNA that we may want to do in the future. Sometimes items, depending on what they are best suited for latent prints to examine first, and then DNA. It's just a discussion between the assigned analyst on what the best, what is best to do first.
Okay.
So I have to agree with you, Max, because I think we're going to get to a point where obviously we're going to all be caught up and on, everybody's going to have watched all the things, right? But I think that one element that we're all missing, which technically isn't something the jury would hear, but it would satisfy our own curiosity. And let's be honest, we're all curious. That's why we're here. Would be some of the pretrial motions, hearing the, oh gosh, help me out here, Shmita. What is it that they call it when when they read off the indictment, that part of it, when they read the charges and how they got to where they are? No, that's where they played guilty or not guilty, not arraignment. It's
The evidentiary hearing?
yeah, the
Kinda?
evidentiary hearing. That's it. Good job, Shameen. I knew you'd know.
Oh, I got it right?
So, yeah, you did. You got it right. The evidentiary hearing. So I think that, and the complaint. That's it. The complaint. Well, we're going to read that. I think they have. I know that's available. So I think we should go over that at some point.
Yeah, I
Because
have some of that. I just wasn't
yeah,
sure how I could upload it or
yeah,
it.
we should definitely do it because I think that's going to be important just for our understanding of what happened. Because when a case like this goes to trial, there's a lot of stuff that goes into all of the things, right? One of the things that takes place is the defendant is evaluated, and they're evaluated to see if they are competent to stand trial. And it's different. It's the same standard pretty much throughout every state, but it's same but kind of different. And that's why I'm kind of not understanding the situation going on with Lori Vallow. But he would have been evaluated for this, and they do it to all defendants, not just to stand trial, but also they're taking them into the jail and they got to know all the things, yada yada yada. And I'm sure he had a psychological evaluation, and I think if there was even the slightest chance at an insanity plea, I think that's what the defense would have tried to do. I just don't. So what I'm saying is I don't think that obviously it's not a rational act that he committed, right? Nothing that he did was rational, but I don't know. I actually think he was pretty methodical about it, which is actually what might actually be scarier. Okay, well, let's keep going.
Yeah.
We're almost through it. We've only got like 12 minutes, 13 minutes left.
In this case, you were asked to swab the inside of the shoes near the heel, or that's what you decided to do. Why would one swab the inside of the shoes?
You might want to know who was wearing them.
And here we're looking at the left Brooks shoe in that bag that's in front of you. We don't have to do anything with it right now. It's there. There you reach some results, and that is uninformative for Bart, very strong support for inclusion for Krista, and uninformative for Mitchell, but very strong support for Chandler.
Yes, it was a 4-person mixture and that had at least one male.
And you examined the other shoe as well, right?
Yes.
And we'll skip ahead too. Here's the right shoe. And there, very strong support for exclusion for Bart. You exclude Krista. Very strong support for exclusion of Mitchell, but very strong support for inclusion of Chandler.
Yes.
Meaning Mr. Halderson, Mr. Chandler Halderson is the only one with the left and right shoe that had strong support for inclusion of some sort.
Yes.
There was a stain you previously testified about on the bottom of those shoes. You labeled it sub-designation AD1B. Your conclusions there for the staining on the bottom of the shoes. Bart Halderson, strong support for inclusion.
Yes.
Krista Halderson, very strong support for inclusion.
Yes.
Mitchell Halderson, moderate support for exclusion.
Yes.
And Chandler Halderson, moderate support for inclusion.
Yes.
Was that the stain that you previously testified was blood?
Yes.
This perhaps hasn't come into the case, but you were provided and we're just going to present everything. You were provided a pair of jeans at some point.
Yes.
And that those pair of jeans were items AE1, and you found very strong support for inclusion of Chandler, and you excluded everybody else.
Yes.
Shmeda, did you catch whose shoes these were? I think they were the Brooks brothers' shoes.
Your last report
I think
that you
so.
did
I think he testifies too. He's got like the floofy
is
hair.
much shorter,
Okay.
I would imagine, than
Or-
all
Yeah,
of the other
I'm-
reports.
but do you know whose shoes they were?
Oh, I'm not to say for
Showing you
sure.
report number 560.
Okay. I missed that part
When
too.
was this report dated?
Alice was doing things.
November 8th, 2021.
And it's fair to say the police at some point found a gun and they brought it out to you to see if there was any DNA on it.
Yes.
And were you able to find any?
I took 3 swabbings from the rifle, and the results had very limited human DNA, limited male DNA, which mean it was unsuitable for further analysis.
You couldn't draw any conclusions from it.
Right.
Are guns a difficult object to detect DNA on sometimes?
They can be, yes.
Do you examine guns often in your job?
Yes.
And are you always able to extract DNA from somewhere on that gun when you sample it?
No.
If you want to drink water, that might be a good thing.
You
I'm gonna ask you a couple
were going to
questions on
highlight
everyone,
that
but we might be
too.
close to the end.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, here we
Good
go.
afternoon. So a couple questions for you. Earlier, Mr. Brown mentioned something about the crime lab being able to only test a limited amount of items. Is that correct?
They can. We can accept more, but usually we like a heads up first.
Okay. So I think the number 10 was used. Is that just a typical number that's assigned to homicide cases?
Yes.
And the state can certainly ask for more than 10 items to be tested.
Yes.
They're not limited in the amount of items. In other words, no more than 20 items can be tested, correct?
We just like to limit it just so it doesn't become very overwhelming. They can certainly ask for more to be submitted.
Of course, and that makes sense. Now, we talked a lot about DNA in general and blood. So if I hold this pen and you swab it, my DNA is going to be on this pen, correct?
Potentially, yes.
And there's no blood, just take my word for it. There's no blood on this pen. So you're still going to be able to pick up some DNA on that, correct?
Potentially, yes.
And that's why, and please correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes when we're designating or when the crime lab was designating swabs, there was just a general swab of blah versus swab of staining of blah. Does that sound about right?
Right.
So is it fair to assume that if there was a staining in front of that swab or in that swab, that's testing for DNA of the staining in particular? Yes?
Potentially, yes.
And if it just said the general swab,
The chick,
then
the
that would be just
person speaking right
general
now, that's the
swabbing,
defense
no blood
attorney.
detected or no blood necessary. Yes.
Potentially, yes.
And just to give you a better example, let's see. If you want to look at your September 1st report, and I'm looking at, does the bottom have bait stamps for you?
Do you have the page number?
Yeah, I'm looking at 2,903.
Exhibit 417.
Yes, thank you, Judge.
2903, you said?
Yep.
Yep.
So right in the middle of that page, it says swabbing of handles of scissors, correct?
Yes.
And then right below that, it says swabbing of staining on blades on scissors, correct?
Yes.
So the first one, is it safe to assume that it's just a general swab of the handles?
Yes, trying to avoid any type of staining seen on the handle.
And the second one is more specific to staining seen on the
Blade.
on that particular item.
On the blade, yes.
And then while we're looking at that sample of the handles in general, Mr. Halderson was excluded. And by Mr. Halderson, I mean Chandler was excluded.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about the standards used. And when I say standards, I'm talking about the individuals that were compared to that sample, correct?
Yes.
So as far as standards given, it sounds like there were just 4 samples or 4 standards that the crime lab used, correct?
Those were what were submitted to the lab, yes.
So if there were any other standards or any other individuals that were trying to get comparison from items, those would have been provided in your report, correct?
Yes, results would have been given.
Judge, can we approach?
Oh, I see what she's doing. So what she's trying to intimate here or imply here is that had they included other people for testing, the results would have been different. Potentially could have been different. But no, ma'am. Sorry, that's not accurate.
It's not gonna work.
No.
So yeah, as we're listening to this,
Hmm.
I think Allie79 will like this. I am compiling pictures that I have uncovered from Facebook of Chazzle Dazzle at band camp.
Oh boy. Are they still talking at the bench or is she talking? Because I can't hear her.
I don't know if she's taught like.
She is
Oh,
talking,
she
but I
looks like
can't.
yeah.
Yeah, but I can't hear her. Hold on. Let me give it a pause. See what's happening here. Yeah, I don't know why we can't hear her.
Maybe they didn't.
Oh, watch them
I
not
think
have
they
put.
might have. Yeah, I don't think they put the sound back on after. There's a white noise.
Rude.
They had one job.
Dan. Well, I don't think they turned the mic back on. But what I'll say is this. Will be very curious how what the defense is going to present as far as their case, because I maybe this situation that occurred with him as far as his testing positive maybe bought them a little bit of time. I don't know, because I don't get it at all. I don't understand where they're trying to go with this, but I'm curious and I'm waiting. But I don't think that we're gonna get the sound back. So I'm just gonna
You
go
know
ahead
what we
and
don't hear about though?
what? Hold on, let me
Now that I
stop
think
sharing
about
this.
it, a lie detector test.
Okay, so those aren't admissible in court. So where it would be in the discovery, meaning it would be
Okay.
part of the investigation, but those results and those tests would not be admitted into the court. They're not allowed to, they're not admissible in court because they're not
Mm.
100%.
I thought it was kind
So,
of like they can't say that you're guilty because you failed, but they could maybe like the defense could bring it up and be like, well, they passed, kind of like the Wells case, right? That's what they keep
well,
saying. It. Well, we did
well,
a.
no, see, they can talk. Okay, so in the beginning, right, when they're doing an investigation, the police officers or the investigators are allowed to announce the taking and then the results of a polygraph test during the course of an investigation. That is okay to do. What isn't allowed is the test and then the results to be presented in a court of law. So it cannot be discussed. They'll never talk about whether the person took a polygraph exam and whether they failed or they passed. If they're not admissible in the United States, so we don't allow them. So you can't talk about it when it goes to trial. You can talk about it in the press, as far like like they're doing with like they've done with other cases, but you can't. It's not admissible, so they can't talk about it when it goes to trial. It's not admitted into evidence. So yeah, this is pretty interesting. Got some interesting results that your girl here is going to hit up those Googles, because I don't understand a couple of that one piece of evidence is something I don't understand. And so I'm going to wait. I mean, I want to understand what those results mean. So I'm going to go ahead and thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you for joining the members. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you to the mods. And happy, happy, happy birthday, Momo. And as always, thank you, Shamita, for being here with me and going over all of this and uploading all of it and everything for us so we can talk about it. Thank you very much.
Of course, of course.
All right.
Gives me something to do.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad that we're getting an opportunity to, we hardly ever get to be on panel together, and I like it. This has been fun. So
I've learned a lot this past week.
it's
Like, it's
crazy, isn't
different
it?
when you have to comment on it
Mm-hmm.
and not just like listen. And
yeah. It's different. I had a lot of fun. I don't know what we're going to have tomorrow night, but we'll have something. So either we'll do more trial, or maybe we might take a break and upload one of the roasts. Maybe we'll see. Just depends. We'll figure it out between us all, but we'll let you guys know. So I want to say good night, everybody. Thanks for spending your Thursday night with us. From me and Shamita, goodbye.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. Okay, bye.
Goodbye.
Okay, bye.